Hello, this is Patrick Barnard in Montreal. It is June 26, 2025, and this is the 20th edition of the International Press Review. An enormous number of momentous events have occurred this June. First of all, there is the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and right now people are being shot for seeking food, desperately hungry people. And then there's the attacks on Iran. First of all, June 13th, the attack begun by the Israeli Army and Air Force against Iran itself. And then on June 22nd, the bombing of Iran by the United States. All of these events are extraordinary, and I'm going to try to give you a picture of them here in the International Press Review by talking about reporters and journalists who have been reporting on these stories. I'm going to start with the views and the reports of two outstanding reporters in the Mideast region. The first is Lise Doucette. She was born in Canada. She's the chief diplomatic correspondent of the BBC. She began as a freelancer in Afghanistan. Lise Doucette is so dependable, so straightforward that people trust her everywhere. The other person I'm going to talk about is Rami Khouri. He is a veteran Jordanian Lebanese reporter of Palestinian origin. He's actually born in New York City. And I'm going to intercut these two people and what they have to say right now. By the way, Lise Doucette reports from Iran right now. She's allowed to do that because they respect her so, but her reports are not allowed to be aired on the BBC's Persian service.
Iran's state TV, the studio where the supreme leader's speeches are aired, but not today, not after Israel attacked it. Forcing the newsreader to flee, her desk devoured by fire. Today, a fiery message of his own from the Ayatollah, said to have sheltered in a bunker during the war.
Iran, with its iron national resolve, rejects surrender. For a country like this, the idea of surrender is laughable to anyone who truly knows the Iranian nation.
For now, a fragile ceasefire. Tehran starts to look like itself, its infamous traffic, its beautiful bazaars, residents slowly returning to a city they left to escape the bombs.
Difficulty we have, everybody has, is that neither the Iran-Israel or Iran-US war nor the Israel-Palestine war has been resolved. The underlying core conflicts are unaddressed, and they've both worsened in the last year. And the United States clearly has not figured out how it can be the primary supporter, armorer, funder, and diplomatic protector of the Israeli genocide and the Israeli assault on Iran's nuclear research facilities, and how it can be a mediator at the same time. That conflict has not been resolved. Donald Trump is responding with dramatic moves, theatrical moves, and inconsistent moves. So in theory, yes, the U.S. could pressure the Israelis and others could pressure Hamas to compromise, but the chances of it happening, I think, are very, very slim because the core pressure for conflict and killing and death and regional hegemonic aspirations by Israel and the U.S. have not changed.
But for some, it's still a battle, just to breathe. In this ward, there are civilians, not soldiers. Murtaza shows his scars. He was working in the transport department when the entrance to the notorious Evin prison was bombed.
Israel lies, saying they are only hitting military and nuclear sites. They hit a prison. I was there. I was hurt. And I'm amazed countries like England, France, the US, and the UN don't condemn Israel.
The abandoned American embassy, a monument to Iran's troubled relationship with the West, accused of sponsoring terrorism, of trying to develop a nuclear bomb. Charges Tehran denies. But even inside this former embassy, a cafe serving iced Americanos. Amir tells me he wants to see a better relationship between America and Iran. So many Iranians do. But in this dark time, there's still not much light. The message in public was defiant, but this blackened studio symbolizes this dark moment in Iran, the most difficult and dangerous decisions confronting the supreme leader, the most fateful choices in his nearly 40 years in power. A new, uncertain chapter in an old, long-standing war.
That's one element. The other is the consistency of the U.S. support for what Israel is doing, not just in Gaza, but in all of Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, and now Iran. So these are really tough contradictions to overcome, and the United States, especially under Trump, has shown no ability or inclination to overcome them.
That was Rami Khouri talking as part of the Al Jazeera program Inside Story, and of course, Elise Doucette with the BBC. Just for the record, the International Press Review is completely non-commercial. Rami Khouri is one of a large number of people who think that what's really going on in the Middle East is a brutal struggle for hegemony. I read recently a very interesting article in the local Montreal Francophone newspaper Le Devoir. It was by Jean-Michel Landry. He's an anthropologist who teaches at Ottawa's Carleton University. And the headline of the piece translated into English is, "The Middle East is Israelizing itself every day, bit by bit." Landry shows us, the readers, a picture of all those countries around Israel where Israel is exercising military force. In the south of Lebanon and even in Beirut itself. In Syria, where the Israeli government is demanding that the new government in Syria not deploy its troops in its own country, south of Damascus, even as far afield as Egypt and Libya, where pressure has been put on those governments to stop the marchers from going to Gaza, the peace marches. They've had their passports confiscated and they've been thrown in jail. This piece by Landry is truly disturbing, and he says it's a new framework in the Middle East. This hegemony in the Middle East involving Israel and the United States, I believe, is unstable. In the words of the poet, a violent order is disorder. I got a sense of it in the last few days. Zaina Hodder is another very well-known Middle Eastern journalist. She's based out of Lebanon. She went to American schools in Lebanon, and many people follow her. She's an amazing person. You see her picture here. And Zaina Hodder broadcast very short piece this past week, and she was standing in the middle of Beirut, central Beirut, in a park, and she talked about the buzz of drones, Israeli drones, right overhead. She's someone who's not afraid of anything. It was what those drones represented to her that obviously was disturbing. Gaza is a particular place where this violent hegemony is visible, very visible. People lining up for aid distributed by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, an organization that was partly planned by a man who's a 29-year veteran of the CIA and an expert in paramilitary affairs. Here's a report on Gaza in the last days from Britain's Channel 4.
For weeks now, images like these grimly familiar. Food distribution by GHF, the Israeli US-sponsored Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Figures released today by the Hamas-controlled Gaza government say 549 people have been killed in the first month of the foundation's work, 4,066 injured. In that first month, Israel's Haaretz newspaper documents 19 instances of the Israeli army opening fire near these food handouts. And today, it reports Israeli soldiers saying they were ordered to open fire on crowds of civilians seeking food, even though they posed no threat.
Haaretz is a very distinguished Israeli newspaper. Netanyahu and company cannot stand the paper because it's got such good reporting. And here you can see this very, very famous article now that was published actually on Friday, June 27, 2025. I'll read the opening to you. IDF, that's Israeli Defense Force, IDF officers and soldiers told Haaretz that they were ordered to fire at unarmed crowds near food distribution sites in Gaza, even when no threat was present. And this is the most striking quotation in the article. One IDF soldier told Haaretz, "It's a killing field. Where I was stationed, between 1 and 5 people were killed every day. They were treated like a hostile force. No crowd control measures, no tear gas, just live fire with everything imaginable, heavy machine guns, grenade launchers, mortars. I'm not aware of a single instance of return fire. There's no enemy, no weapons." In Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu and his defense minister both accused Haaretz of blood libel. In other words, they were saying the newspaper is anti-Semitic. Why? Because the newspaper was getting at the truth. Totalitarianism, fanaticism, both at home and abroad, wherever it is, deeply dislikes a free press. They do not like newspaper reporters and media reporters who reveal the truth. In fact, they hate it. This press review began with the whole question of Iran in the past month, and I mentioned that Lise Doucette was allowed to report from Tehran with the understanding that the BBC's Persian service in London would not use her material. Now there's some very unfortunate news. Family members of BBC Persian are being harassed and threatened in Iran. There's a crackdown on people right now taking place. That's a great shame because BBC Persian did some very good reporting in the last month. This edition of the International Press Review will end with the question of Iran and the American bombing of certain Iranian nuclear facilities using very, very special bombers and extremely heavy bombs. Almost immediately after this happened, CNN produced an extraordinary report. They were leaked a defense intelligence assessment from inside the United States government. The headline of the report was "Exclusive. Early U.S. intel assessment suggests strikes on Iran did not destroy nuclear sites," sources say. The 3 reporters were Natasha Bertrand, you see her picture up on the screen, her colleagues Katie Bo-Lillis and Zachary Cohen. It's a very well-researched story, 7 sources altogether, a very coherent picture, I think, of what has actually happened. The lead paragraph reads as follows: "The U.S. military strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities last weekend did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program and likely only set it back by months." Now, President Trump in the United States and his entourage were infuriated by this story. But in fact, it's been confirmed by other outlets, such as this story you see in the Financial Times. And the consensus, I would say, is that the Iranians managed to take out their enriched uranium, and it's a lot of it, and put it in another site, and their nuclear program, while damaged, in fact, can restore itself. The people in Washington hated this. And in fact, the White House press secretary called out Natasha Bertrand in a very dangerous way, almost seeming to inspire irrationality in the larger audience that follows the MAGA president. So that's the end for this edition of the International Press Review.